Hey, this is Alan Stein, leadership performance coach, and you are listening to Success is a Choice with Jamy Bechler.
Providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Welcome to Success is a Choice podcast. I'm your host, Jamy Bechler. And I'm excited to talk with today's guest because we have similar ideas when it comes to leadership. Dr. Cory Dobbs is the founder and president of the Academy for Sports Leadership. He believes in developing a leader in every locker, not just the captains, which is outlined in his book, Coaching for Leadership and Becoming a Team Leader. Dr. Dobbs is an adjunct faculty member of the Collegiate School of Sports Business at Grand Canyon University and in the Sports Leadership Department at Ohio University. He is also a former college basketball coach. Dr. Dobbs, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Jamie, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Yeah, I look forward to talking with you about leadership. And, let's just dive right in. You have a new book out, Coaching for Leadership, Developing a Leader in Every Locker. Talk about this new book and what the origins is, what the genesis of it is. Why'd you want to write it?
Yes. So, Jamie, the book is called Coaching for Leadership with the subtitle of, How to Develop a Leader in Every Locker. The leader in every locker concept is something that I've come to learn over the last probably 5, 6, 7 years of being it's a better way to optimize leadership and team development. It took a lot of research to do this, research in the sense of going out in the field. So I spent countless hours observing, schools, practices, and coaches meetings. I've got pilot schools that I pilot test things in at the high school, junior college, and the NCAA levels. So I kind of, have a place to, my own laboratory, if you will. So I kind of, created that. And through that, I actually started the process of leadership development with the idea, where I was. And that's where every coach in America has 2 to 3 team captains. And so what I found over time was that this is such a faulty way, of building a team, and specifically it's selfish in the sense of it doesn't take a look at everybody and say that everybody has leadership potential and leadership opportunities, because you find out down the road that somebody that may have been given a team captain role, down the road, somebody that did not have a team captain role is actually a better leader. And then you start to ask the question, well, why weren't they, a team captain? Or why did they get an opportunity to lend their leadership capabilities to the team? And so coaching for leadership development the coaching for leadership takes the idea that coaches should be, or those that agree with the idea of a leader in every locker. That means the coach casts themselves in the role of a leadership educator. And that's far different than, anything that's done in the past. When I still go out and talk to coaches and do workshops and classes, I still find that the norm is 2 to 3 team captains. And, this kind of reminds me of things such as the no-huddle offense, so we're taking a risk. When a coach does the 2 to 3 team captains, they are a leader in every locker, they kind of are taking a huge leap in their world, which is, the sporting world. And, you take a look at the no-huddle offense, shotgun. These are things that in football were just kind of, poo-pooed for a long time. Go back to 1966 Texas Western, coached by Don Haskins, 5 all-black starters, in the national championship game. So, the idea of change is very difficult. And so I've actually, been, by fine-tuning my 20 principles and concepts that you'll find in the Coaching for Leadership, you start to see that you can change, and that it's a better way, a better system to adapt to, the changing world that we live in.
So why is this important? Why do we need a leader in every locker?
Well, I think that first off, and this is one of those things that coaches, I too have an ego, but coaches have an ego, and many coaches think the program revolves around them. And you'll hear coaches that say to the players, it's a privilege to play, in this program. And granted, it is. But I think what happens is that, at some point, there's been a departure from, the program being a student athletic program, and coaches making it an athletic program, with a dominance on the athletic side. What this means is that the human development side, while all coaches say we're teaching life skills, when you ask them how you teach life skills and have you followed through to find out, you may have implemented something this year, but 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, did it stick? Did your student athlete really learn something? And so the leader in every locker, approach, I think, is in an academic environment is a must, because that's why the student is there, is to develop themselves. And I'll just give you a quick example. So suppose for a moment that 3 freshmen are walking through a mall, and one of them gets the idea of stealing a pair of glasses and says to the other 2, "Hey, let's take these glasses. Let's this would be a good good thing to wear on the bus over to the game tonight." Well, you've got these 3 freshmen who have never spoken to each other in a way that they confront a teammate in a non-playing field environment. Well, what good is that? All of a sudden you start to see that you may preach, don't take things that don't belong to you. But how do you get players to really talk about those things? And you have to have a defined program. You just have to have a defined program and a deliberate process of getting these guys to talk together. So, for example, in my program, we have when we break into small groups, we break into triads. That's a group of 3. And if any time in the if we're working through a case study in a triad, if at any time there's all 3 parties are in agreement, one person is designated as a devil's advocate to kind of play the contrarian role and say, well, wait a minute, if we're all 3 thinking this way, what are we missing? And so you can see if you get these 3 freshmen walking through a mall and they've had practice of talking together about difficult choices, they may make different choices.
You talk about this leadership education, and that as a coach, you should be educating to a degree. And it reminds me of a saying I heard once, that good leaders create or develop good followers, but great leaders develop or create other leaders. So that's essentially what you're talking about is developing, as a coach, putting your ego on the back burner and saying, I'm not going to be the only leader on this team. We're going to develop leaders, and not just our captains, but everybody, so that when in that hypothetical situation, you have those 3 freshmen walking around a mall, that there may not be a captain in that group, but they still can be a captain of themselves, or they can still be a leader for themselves and then a leader for others. Absolutely.
Definitely. When you do this, as you said, the coach has to understand that it's not, all about how I lead the team, in the team setting. You've got to be very, coaches that excel at as leadership educators. There's a sense of vulnerability there. Because they have to give over to the players certain responsibilities. And one of the things that comes to mind, and I'll step on people's feet, and I don't mind, because it's a little nudge to move people forward. But still, at the major college level, football programs, and I don't know, Jamie, if you experience this, but they send out people that are designated to make sure and check that the student athlete is in class. Well, that's a joke. Because what you're doing is you're empowering them to play a game with you, instead of being somebody that's, if my teammate doesn't go to class, I need to be, as a team member, somebody that's aware of that as well, and part of the inspirational or motivational package, rather than just simply checking a list that somebody's at, that these student athletes are in their class. But that takes vulnerability, because, of course, now you're talking about millions of dollars on my contract, and being vulnerable to, an 18-year-old and 19-year-old going to class. So they try to do everything they can to ensure that the student athlete goes to class, but the student athlete categorizes that as a game. They get up and leave once they've been checked as in. They get up and leave the environment. And many coaches around the country are still doing this. And, so you can see that it does take a vulnerability. But once you get through that, once you work your way through that, you're guaranteed of having a higher success rate.
You talked about conducting a lot of research out there in the field, but some of the research that you did probably was when you were a a basketball coach yourself. Talk about what your leadership philosophy was as a coach, and how did you kind of come to have this philosophy, and what would you do differently if you went back to be a coach today?
Well, and here's an interesting thing. I as a coach, I was always in favor of rotating captaincy, so that everybody would get a little bit of a feel for what captaincy is about. Unfortunately, one of the things that I did not achieve or didn't take the path was to be a head coach. And I worked with some head coaches, but I got to tell you that working with head coaches and watching and doing research with head coaches, so my experience dovetailed with my experience in the field. Again, here's the level of vulnerability. Most coaches wouldn't even listen to me. They didn't believe that student athletes can really be good leaders.
And it's so sad, and I see that as I go out and work with teams myself. The stigma of hiring a leadership coach is a negative one out there, and that's that the head coach can't do their job. But nobody says that about hiring an athletic trainer or a performance coach or a strength and conditioning coach. Even though the coach knows how to tape an ankle or the coach knows how to do weights, it's okay to delegate tasks in that area. But in maybe one of the most important areas of leadership and character, they're not hiring as many people nowadays. So, that is a little sad sometimes, that ego.
It is, and I'll tell you that you hit it dead on. It is, if you really look out and you say, okay, over the next 5 to 10 years, what would be something that coaches in all sports, but if we just looked at lacrosse, volleyball, basketball, baseball, softball, if you take a look at all the major sports that are on the campuses at most universities, and you said if they brought on one person onto their staff that was a leadership team building expert, what would this do for them? What would this do for their program? And you and I can look at that and say an awful lot, but it's going to take the head coach, because then of course they're vulnerable at that point to some of the things that you say or you do. And, that's one of the things that I'm kind of been blessed with some pilot programs, pilot schools that I've worked with, is they give me a lot of leeway to implement things, to see how things work, so I can see things, the wheels fall off on something, but yet then some, a way to rebuild the process that just looked like it was, was not going to work. But yeah, I agree with you. There's a huge need, and if you really look out on the horizon and said, could this be one of the things that head coaches should really strongly look at? Well, the answer from my perspective is without a doubt.
We'll return to the interview with Cory Dobbs shortly, but I wanted to take a moment to let you know about something that goes hand in hand with what he is trying to do in leading leaders, coaching coaches, and helping to develop student athletes' leadership skills. We've written a book entitled The Leadership Playbook, Become Your Team's Most Valuable Leader. It's packed full of insightful stories and practical tips to help student athletes become better leaders and teammates. When we help develop students, we are also helping to influence the future in a positive way. Please visit theleadershipplaybook.com to get more information about this book. And now back to our interview with Cory Dobbs. Well, we have a lot of educators and a lot of coaches that listen to this podcast, and just by listening to this, you're kind of saying that you want to be more successful. You want to be as good as you can be as a coach. And so, for those coaches out there that are listening that are willing to look at a different perspective or willing to try something different, what would be some tips or advice you would have for them to develop their leadership better on their teams?
Well, I think the first thing is that the coach himself or herself, they have to start to understand, and it's a process of self-discovery. And I don't have anything, against, for example, the Myers-Briggs or the DISC profile. Those are good. But, in my program, I've found that, I've used them occasionally and they worked okay, and okay isn't enough for me. So I've actually advocate, a discovery process. So, for example, a good portion of the book, Coaching for Leadership, runs through and forcing the coach to kind of look at themselves and discover, well, how am I as a leadership educator? How am I leading my coaching staff and my team? So that's something that the very process of discovery, personal discovery, and the only way that you can discover the best way to discover what you're doing is to be able to become a person that's reflective, which, and I'd say reflective on the relational side, not the technical and tactical side, which of course is, game, film, and all that kind of study. But how do you study the relationships that are going on within the team? And by the way, it doesn't just end, the coach is a leadership educator with the players. It also goes to their coaching staff. I'd estimate that 50% of the coaching staffs out there are quite dysfunctional.
That's a scary stat, but you're onto something there, and that's too, once you're a coach and you decide, all right, we're going to help develop the team leadership. It's not just the players. If you're not developing your staff, then there's not going to be a consistent message being shared.
Oh, not at all. And, the major barrier to the student athlete becoming a leader or actually having a great leadership experience, growth experience, is the coach and the coaching staff. Here's the thing. For example, as I said, one of the pilot programs that I have is a junior college, and these are players that then go on to a four-year school. So they take and go through a very intense program, 8 to 10 weeks long, and then carried through the season. And then you drop them into a new environment, and you ask them, how's the leadership stuff that you learned, the leadership capabilities that you've learned to use and to create a certain leadership mindset. How are you able to use that in your new setting? And 80 to 90% of the time, they're not. And then you say, well, why? Well, because of the head coach and the coaching staff and the way they run their program. They don't acknowledge that, and they don't need that, or they don't perceive the need for student-athlete leadership. So that those that have learned it now drop them into a different environment, and you can real quickly figure out that it is the coach. The coach is the greatest barrier, and it is the situation. So the coach then is in charge of building a situation in which the student-athletes learn leadership.
Much of your work is directed towards student-athletes and coaches, but what could be done if you're a parent listening to this, or what could parents do to help develop their kids' leadership? Maybe they have a good coach, maybe they don't have a good coach that's doing leadership development. What could a parent do to help develop that?
Yeah, great question, because ultimately, when I look at, when you do a deep look at sports, you realize that kids come through a system where they're actually asked to be passive in leadership capacities. And, so if you're in a junior basketball team and there's 15 kids on the team and 2 are designated team captains just for the jump ball situation, all that kind of stuff, to talk to the officials, that means that, 12 kids are not. They're actually asked to be passive. So the system actually encourages passivity. And so what you have to do as a parent is, you have to start at home, and you have to say, well, hopefully it's a leader in every seat, in your classroom. So you try to change. We have a formula that we start with, which is mindset plus skill set plus actions equals outcome. So as a parent, it's my job to foster and nurture a leadership mindset. If I can do that, then they can understand certain situations. My son or daughter then understands certain situations and how they can then be, express leadership. Go back to those 3 freshmen walking through the mall. Had one of them been fostered, nurtured, leadership mindset at home, it may have been a different story, different ending to that story.
What are some mistakes or behaviors that you see people making more frequently than others that maybe sidetrack them in developing leadership? So going beyond just, we're not talking about a coach that doesn't believe in developing leaders, but just in general, what kind of mistakes are people making when it does come to leadership other than not even developing people? Well,
the first one, of course, is the 2-team captain. So I can tell you right away, if you're running a program and you've invested only in 2-team captains or 3-team captains, on the outside it may be a larger team, maybe 4-team captains. I can tell you right away you're wasting you're wasting your time. The second thing is time. Coaches that are not willing to invest time, that see it as a check the box thing. We went through this program and let's check the box and we're done with that. We move on. well, again, you wasted your time. You know, it's a full season thing. I mean, you know, the thing that I found very interesting, and it kept happening year after year for about 3-4 years in a row with teams. You know, most people in team building are familiar with Tuckman's 5 phases of team development. You know, the forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning stages. And so what I would find that, and I'll use basketball as an example. The first game comes along and the ball is tipped in the air and season's underway. Well, you look at, you know, what transpires or can transpire across the course of the next 3 to 4 weeks is you start to see a dip in team building and leadership from student athletes. And you have to ask the question, why? Well, all of a sudden you find out that when you start dividing that pie of playing time, everything you did before that kind of falls apart unless you're prepared for it. And so coaches that say, well, I'm going to do this in the preseason, and they'll have an outing with the team and as a, you know, kind of a summation of the process, and we're done. Okay, and forget about leadership carrying it forward. You know what we learned, and invariably, you know, things come apart right after the first ball, you know, is tipped in the air. And so time, you know, you've got to be willing to give. I ask coaches, you've got to give at least 10% of your schedule, your daily schedule, or your weekly schedule to leadership development. And that may be away from the court, I don't know, or away from the playing field. But you've got to do that. You've just got to stay after that, and you've got to be disciplined. As disciplined as you are on teaching your offensive system and your defensive systems, what are you doing with your leadership system? You know, so you've got to invest in it as one of your key systems. And if you do, you'll get results. If you don't, it's like a diet. It worked for the first couple of months, but you went off it, and now you're back to you regress to the mean, really, is what we say in the academic world.
Now, you're doing a lot to give to others through teaching, through coaching of coaches. You're giving a lot. Are there podcasts, are there books, are there conferences, things that you're doing to help fill you back up and help develop you further as a leader?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the interesting thing is, of course, now that I'm a fan of Jamy Bechler, I'm going to work my way through his system and series of podcasts, which, by the way, the ones that I've listened to so far have been great. So I appreciate that, and I think that coaches, you know, around the country and hopefully, you know, around the world, hook up and, you know, start listening to some of those podcasts. I think the second thing is Malcolm Gladwell is kind of, you know, his podcasts are something akin to what I do. I mean, I applaud him as a social psychologist, because one of the things that I had to do to create, to become a better leadership educator was I had to divorce myself from the sport. You know, I get so deep into it with a team or with a coach that I found myself not willing to, you know, to confront coaches on their bad behavior and things like that. And it takes a contrarian perspective. And I think that's what Malcolm Gladwell brings, is a contrarian perspective on the one hand. On the other hand, it's a well researched social psychological perspective that he often offers us.
So other than Malcolm Gladwell, is there someone that you would love to spend some time with or meet that you don't currently know?
Well, you know that it would be Malcolm Gladwell. I think that there's Brian Robertson, who wrote a book called Holacracy, which is, again, it's the word holacracy is not the aristocracy that you see in the typical hierarchical model that we find in sport. So his book Holacracy is something that says he may be somebody that I'd like to sit down with and have a conversation with. Michael Lewis, the writer of Moneyball, again, another contrarian. You know, how did the way he developed the book and his other books are usually, his research process. I'd just love to, walk alongside him on his, doing some of his research. So I think that those are a couple. I think another one that coaches should be aware of is Cal Newport, who wrote a book called, I think he's from Harvard, Deep Work. Today we live in a world that is extremely distracted. How do we develop, deep work, which means, not just, again, I said that coaches have to invest in their leadership system just like they do their offensive system or defensive system. Well, that's deep work. Are you willing to do the deep work? You do it with the technical and tactical parts of your game. Are you willing to do it with the relational parts?
So what is a purchase of $100 or less that you've made that's had a profound impact on your life?
Well, I think, one would be that, would be a date with my wife. It was less than $100, and it certainly panned out and allowed me the opportunity to have somebody alongside me for this journey. And the second is, I kind of filled out my doctoral application years ago, and it costs about $60-$70 to turn it in, and I paid for that, and I had no expectation of really attending, getting my doctorate, but it turned out that I did, and so that was $75 well spent.
Well, that's a great answer. Both answers are good. Your first answer was excellent. Your wife will be happy to hear that. Though she might say, why was it less than $100? Oh,
yeah, absolutely. But it was, and so, the question asked. But what it shows is the power of small actions or small behaviors, and they can turn into and blossom into, and they cascade. They often cascade into, wonderful things.
What is a productivity tool, an app, or a resource that you just can't live without?
I'm going to tell you the truth, and I hope it makes sense for coaches out there, for leaders out there. I use a whiteboard. I can't live without a whiteboard, so much so that for Christmas last year I got a portable whiteboard. The reason I use it is it allows me to do deep work. It gets me away from a computer where I'm, addicted to listening for the little sound that says you've got mail. I'm tempted to hyperlink to someplace else. Here I just sit down and I focus. And it's a way of getting myself out of the distracted world into a world of deep work, and I do my best thinking.
Okay, if you could be on any reality show, what would it be?
Hard Knocks. I love the series Hard Knocks. I love watching it, and I love that I see very little leadership from the players, which tells me a lot. I recall one time. Some players getting together to go meet with the coach, and it was a hush secretive thing, and they were so these are grown men making millions of dollars. They were frightened to do this, and it's like, really? Where have you gone to school? Well, I can guarantee that they were never really asked to do real leadership work, and they found that we really have to do some kind of leadership thing here to meet with the coach and to make some suggestions for the team and have some input beyond what the coach and the coaching staff see for us. So Hard Knocks would definitely be something I'd love to be on.
Well, you're doing a lot of great work. You're leading leaders, you're coaching coaches, you're teaching future generations here. But if you could do something else, or if there was anything that you could do, what would you want to do other than what you're currently doing?
I am a human puzzle puzzle solver, and I love solving the human puzzle. Of course, that's leadership and team building. So I would love to be a detective and solve crimes, solve human crimes, the people puzzle. I absolutely love that stuff.
So do you have a favorite detective show or law show that you watch?
Let's see. NYPD Blue, I like that. The Criminal Minds series. I used to watch that. I haven't watched a whole lot lately, but then I'll catch an occasional 48 hours or something like that, and just stick to if it's a good story, I like it. If it's not, if it's weak, then I don't. But it's the puzzles. I like the puzzles of the human mind.
What is one of your favorite quotes, or just any parting bit of wisdom in general?
We started out, the question you started out with was to tell you a little bit about, the book, Coaching for Leadership. And I think that, John Wooden, said something along the lines of, when you're finished learning, you're finished. And I think that would be a great adage that all coaches, would not just say, but would believe and actually take action in that direction. and continue to find ways to enact a leadership system and team building system that's far beyond what they do today.
Where can people connect with you or learn more about what you're doing?
Well, they can go to my website, sportleadership.com. I put my email address on there, my phone number, so they can contact me either way. I enjoy conversations with people because it's leadership and team building conversations, which are just what I like to do.
Well, Cory, thanks a lot for your time today. Your insights were great, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jamie.
Whether you are a coach, teacher, or a parent, I think Dr. Dobbs provided some great insights that can help as you seek to better develop the students that you come in contact with. And if you enjoyed this podcast, there's a very easy way that you can support it without spending any of your hard-earned dollars. Head over to iTunes, leave a 5-star rating and a quick comment if you want. It's simple, it's easy, it's free. It's the best way to make sure that we are able to do this podcast and to keep adding value to listeners like you each week. Thanks so much for doing this, and until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?